Good morning, my creative friends. Dr. Minette Riordan here, along with Miss Georgia O'Keefe at 7 a.m. Mountain Time in my PJs for a little watercolor play and doodles. I am just back from 9 days away from my studio, and I'm still in that looking to get my creative groove back and also just get myself a little more focused and back into my day to day groove as well. Being away for 9 days was wonderful. I had an amazing retreat at Tingle U in Asheville, North Carolina, followed by another 4 days of just vacation time with my husband for our anniversary. And I didn't work at all. I didn't even take a computer. I made lots of art. I walked a lot. I ate a lot, and I'm finding my way back into my studio and my consistent practice. And you might notice that when life gets busy, that you can get into that place where art making doesn't become your go-to anymore, and you're wondering, how do I get my groove back? Or maybe you're just finding yourself feeling a little bit out of sorts. Well, from my perspective, creative practice is the best and fastest way to reconnect to ourselves and to boost our emotions. Good morning, Leslie. I'm excited to see you in person in a few weeks. And Tori, good morning. Thank you. So, we are going to play with watercolor today. I haven't played with watercolor a lot on here, but I got some new watercolors at the retreat that I'm testing out. And I love doodling with watercolors just as a way to lift my spirits, to move some color around the page, and to look for some fresh inspiration. So that's the direction that we're going. So, Georgia, off you go. Let me switch my camera here and get us started. So, I was playing ahead of time this morning with this little set of watercolors. So, this one has already told me that it needs a nice zentangle bear on it and will get added to my 100-day project. I'm doing 100 days of artsy animals, so I'm excited about having this kind of background. I might work on the mountaintops a little bit or add some trees. But this is what I mean by watercolor play. This is one version, just putting color down on a note card. I was also testing different kinds of paper because I'm teaching an in-person abstract watercolor class in a couple of weeks. So I'm testing paints and I'm testing paper. And I actually really liked this paper, which is just the Michaels watercolor pad, the Artist Loft 140 pound. And this is a cold press, so it's very, very smooth. I love the texture of this one. I love how the color flowed on it. So, a lot of times playing with watercolor, it does require you to play. But there's a few different ways. Good morning, Blanca. Good morning, Yvonne. A few different ways that I think that we can just play with watercolor, and you could do any of the process that I'm doing with markers, with acrylic paints as well. But because I'm in watercolor mode right now, I thought I would do something different. Plus, I got this cute little set of watercolors when I was at Tangle U last week, and they're surprisingly pretty nice. They're not my nice Daniel Smith watercolors, but they're great for what I want to do this morning, just playing and doodling. It came with a little brush. It came in this nice little metal tin. I don't, it doesn't have any, it had a wrapper on it, so I don't know where these came from, and that doesn't matter. Any watercolor set will do. It came with this nice, really small round brush that's probably like a number 2. But the first thing that I'm going to do is activate my watercolors. And I'm not going to spray that on my journal, but I'm just going to spray a little bit of water in here and get these wet. And what I want to do first, and I'm going to do this on just a blank page in this same journal I've been working in, which is getting nice and full, is I'm going to swatch the colors. And there is something just very, very soothing about swatching colors. And when you get new paints, it's a great thing to do, to swatch the colors and just see what they do. So, talk about boosting my mood. I have no destination in mind, but I do have a little bit of a project. And sometimes my mind needs something to hold on to that's not challenging or complicated, that's not something that I am in this energy of, oh, I have to finish this or I have to make it beautiful. Nope, this is all about play and experimentation. And watercolors, no two watercolors are created alike. So it can be super valuable to always swatch your watercolors and see what they do. And some of the things that I look for when I'm playing with watercolor is, how rich is the pigment, but I'm also looking for, how do they flow and react to the water. So I'm working wet on dry here. And I'm also going to do some wet on wet play today. And the colors do different things, right? When we use them in different ways. But I was pleasantly surprised, and I haven't yet in my unpacking found the project that we did that I'm excited to share with you guys at Tangle U, where we actually did a zentangle process with watercolors. It was a super, super fabulous class by an artist named Samantha Teeler. Love what she is doing and how she's stretching zentangle into a whole new form and medium. Super, super fun. But I'm kind of happy with these colors, right? Again, this is, a little just very inexpensive watercolor set. So better definitely than like, a student grade. The colors are vibrant. There's a lot of them, which I love. And when I did the wet on wet technique, they actually spread pretty well. So Brad and I made it home late Sunday night, but our suitcases did not. And American was so on top of it. It was great. They had them on the next flight and they got to Denver late on Sunday night and they got delivered to us early yesterday afternoon. Good morning, Julie. Looking forward to seeing you tonight. And I'm not going to swatch that white, but I'm starting with, again, just playing with these colors. And then I will make a note in here also so I remember what watercolor palette this came from. If I can find a pencil here. So I'm just going to put a little note to self. So that I don't so that I remember where they came from. Excuse me. And again, interesting colors. They're a little bit neutral. They're a little bit earthy. They're not super, super vibrant. I might even let some of these, dry. Like I really love this sort of yellow ochre. And I'm drawn to this kind of olivey green. These two blues are really nice. And it's fun to let watercolor dry and then layer over them again, which I will show here in a little bit. But I'm going to go now to this bigger page here, painty page out of the way. And I'm just going to have some fun with my watercolor. And I am going to work with a really large brush. This is a Princeton Heritage. I love these brushes. They're not super expensive, but they're very nice quality, has a really nice tip on it. And this is a number 12 round. So it's a really big brush. And one of the things I love to test when I'm playing with watercolor is how the colors spread. So I've got a nice big puddle here. I know you can't see that puddle. You will in a minute. A nice big puddle of water. And I'm going to get some of that really dark blue. And we want to see what the color does when we place it in that puddle. And this is where you really notice the quality of different colors, right? Is how they blend and flow together. But for me, this is super fun. This is just on mixed media paper, so it's probably going to buckle quite a bit. I'm going to come in with some of this, looks like an umber or sienna, and just let that flow in here. And we're going to get just kind of these beautiful globe shapes. And then I'm going to come in and see, well, what happens if I go onto the page dry without that puddle of water? So you notice that the color doesn't move, right? It sticks on the page. And it's just two different looks and Georgia, no, uh, two different effects. Neither is better than the other, they're just different. It can also be really fun to just pull that color and let things just sort of blend together down the page. And this is what I mean by using watercolor to really lift our spirits, boost our mood with some just watercolor play. I have no destination in mind here. I'm just letting the color flow, seeing how the color blends and mixes. I'm being curious on the page. And this is just, again, like I talked about yesterday, another way. Diego, sorry, my cat is sticking his claws into my leg, trying to say, I need to be in your lap right now. Another way to just play on the page and experiment. And then we can start to just pull that color out to add some doodles. I'm going to change up my brush here and come in maybe with this little tiny brush, and I'm kind of having fun with these colors, and use it almost just like I would with a pen. I'm not thinking about composition. I'm not thinking about light and shadow or shape. I'm just experimenting with the color on the page. I also love letting these pages dry and then coming back in with my microns and adding zentangle patterns over the top of these. And you can see, because this is a thin paper, I'm getting some buckling. I'm also getting some pooling, but that pooling is really kind of cool, and I'm almost wanting to add some more color into some of these. So we can always just come back and drop more color. And this is where these less expensive watercolors, we don't get the same kind of beautiful flow that we do with other watercolors. And this is not a watercolor brush at all. It's an acrylic brush, but I really love the flat tip of it. So it's fun for just exploring and playing. So don't feel like you have to only use watercolor brushes. The caveat for that is I never use my good watercolor brushes with acrylics because it will ruin the brush. So here I have a lot more pigment and less water. So I start to create a different effect on the page. And I'm just noticing where some of this is pooling, and maybe I don't want it to pool that much. And so if I can maybe come in and move that water around a little bit. I can also just take a tissue and daub a tissue in there and soak up some of that water, but I can also just use that water. Interesting, these are very sort of earthy, neutral colors. I didn't think about choosing them. cat here on the page. I'm going to go back to this small one again. And actually, I'm going to grab tissue. So sometimes you can create some really interesting texture with the tissue itself and just pulling a little bit of that color off. And then we'll see what happens when it dries. But again, the way to lift our spirits with creativity is to give ourselves permission to play, to let go of the need to create something that means something or that has some, intrinsic value as something beautiful, and to just allow ourselves to be in the spirit of play. And like I said, I'm kind of impressed with these watercolors. I asked my friend Elaine, and she got them on Amazon, but she didn't remember the brand name. So again, just enjoying the play, and I can sit here literally for hours and just be in this process. I have nowhere to go, nothing to do. This is very much like my zentangle practice. I can feel my whole body relax. I can feel my breathing slowing down. Some of this olivey green here. And I don't know what it is about painting circles that is so soothing, right? So there's no need to create a lot of complicated shapes, circles, some swirls. And I think that oftentimes we think that, we can't waste our art supplies, that we don't have time to play when our creative time is limited, that we have to do something meaningful. But this teaches me so much about what my brushes do. It teaches me about how the paints react to different papers. So this is an invaluable exercise in just giving myself permission to relax, to play, to just be here now. And we don't make enough time in our lives to just be here now. That's why I love our Mindful Patterns membership. We are having such wonderful community calls a few times a month, just getting together to color, to tangle, to paint, to connect, talk about the things that are going on. They've become like, what I imagine quilting circles used to be like, or spinning circles or weaving circles, when women would just get together and talk, and what a, rare gift that is these days. So this one actually feels pretty good. I'm sort of really loving just not having filled the whole page. There's a little bit of movement here, so I'm going to actually pull this one out of here and set it aside to dry, and then maybe come back later with some more. And again, this is just, a mixed media journal. It is not fancy paper. So this one is 140-pound watercolor paper. This was done with the same paints as these, but notice the much more vibrant palette. So I'm exploring all the moods through colors. Color is such a powerful expression of mood and how we're feeling. But one of the things that I wanted to play with was, and I created this one the same way I did the other one, so some wet on wet circles as well as some just dry circles, is coming back over the top of this and adding some tangle patterns inside this dry watercolor, and see how that works. How can we layer them together and what might happen? I don't know, but these are those places of Happy experiments. And we get a really subtle look. Plus, we can't always have a lot of control. It's paint, not a pen. So again, just going slowly and coming in and adding those doodles right over the top of my paint. And I'm a little obsessed with flowers right now. Well, I'm always a little obsessed with flowers, but after our beautiful visit to Asheville, it was definitely spring, and I came home to spring. My tulips are up. Our tree, don't even know what kind of tree it is, out front is blooming. Spread for pears are blooming. I saw a redbud tree yesterday, so lots of flowers everywhere. And I love this layered look, right? So I'm using a quite small brush to do this detail work. But you get such just a subtle look of layering the watercolor on watercolor. And the secret is definitely that the color needs to be super dry. And you want to keep your watercolors wet, right? Like if they get too dry, you're start gonna have them not flow as nicely. So you could be mixing some of this on a palette. I'm just gonna keep this wet. The other thing I love about having a tin lid like this is a great way, like I could actually come in and use this as a bit of a palette. So if I wanted to get some nice blobs of color going in here, anything can work as a watercolor palette, which is pretty exciting. That one almost a little too wet. And then I can tell that there's probably too much water on here. So one of the things that's challenging about watercolor is finding the balance, right? Finding the balance of water to pigment. And that's why these morning watercolor doodle sessions are good for skill building, but they're also just so good for our creative spirits to call in the color that we need that day, to call in imagery or symbol, or to not have any idea at all where we're going. And just keep adding and playing. I got a little more water in my palette than I probably wanted in there, but it will dry up. So I'm noticing some of those colors are mixing. And we don't even need to know a lot of patterns or a lot of shapes. Lines, dots, swirls. And this one is pretty wet, which is intentional. So I'm getting a little bit thicker line because I'm using a little more water. And you notice I'm just curving those lines just a little bit, which is going to give a little bit of illusion to some depth here to the design. But I want to encourage you when you feel like you're in a creative slump and you're trying to get your groove back, or you just wake up and you're just having a day and not really even knowing quite what's going on with you, that turn to the page. When words fail, so some of us are love to journal. I love to journal, but lately I've been finding that the words aren't always there. And when we can't find the words to express what's going on with us, turn to color, turn to paint, turn to the page. Watercolors are great for this. Oil pastels are also great for these kind of morning expressive doodles. And I love just the simple layer of color on color. Two very different effects, and I could go over and over this. Every time the watercolor dries, I can come back in with a new layer. Having this tiny brush definitely helps. So there are really three sizes of watercolor brush are all you need. The great big number 12, and then like a number 6 is a great medium size, and then this tiny little number 2 round brush for detail work. Oftentimes we think, we need all the things. I'm curious, does anyone other than me find watercolor challenging? I would say this is my most challenging medium for sure. And one of the ways that I have learned to fall in love with watercolor is with these just really simple, playful watercolor doodles. Yeah, the trick, Tori, is definitely to just give yourself permission to play more, right? Just to play more. The more we just play with the medium, the more we understand what it does. And I also, one of the things that I discovered from my friend Andrea Shebelu is that good watercolor makes a difference. That part of why I was struggling was wrong paper, not high quality paint. So they weren't doing sort of all the things that they were supposed to do. It's also important to play with your brushes and to discover what are the different marks and shapes that your brushes will make. And again, this is such a fun experiment, and it pulls me out of myself. It pulls me out of the whatever doldrums I'm in. So I think this is the Princeton, yeah, this is a Princeton 6, which has a beautiful, beautiful shape. It makes the most gorgeous leaf shapes. And I can move around the page working in those places where it's dry. And sometimes you can, so not wet enough, really let that watercolor just do the work for you and play with your brush. See what kind of shape you can create. That was something that I remember taking a class with Wendy Solganic from Willa Wanders, and somebody, asked her about her beautiful leaf shapes, and she said she just practices. She just fills pages and pages. So again, finding that perfect blend of water, exploring what shapes can I make with the brush. Letting that brush do the work for me. And we just get interesting shapes. Awesome. That's a great birthday present, Tori. I love it. When I discovered Daniel Smith, it was like, okay, these definitely are by far my favorites. Again, just playing on the page. I love spirals. I could paint a whole page full of spirals for sure. And when things are wet on wet, they're going to bleed and run together. So this is where if you don't want things to bleed and run together, watercolor can require a lot of patience. But what I love about it is that it definitely asks me to be fully present in the moment. No messing around, paying attention. So it becomes a beautiful mindfulness exercise in presence. Just me and the color on the page. And I always leave the page in a better place than when I start. Not taking this too seriously. Not taking myself too seriously. I love this yellow ochre color. All right, I'm going to set that one aside for a minute. Another thing that I love to do with the watercolor is just to paint stripes is another way to boost our mood, to play with color, get some color down on the page. And we can do this in a lot of different ways, but I'm going to start with just a line of watercolor here. Maybe I'll come in with some of this sort of turquoisey blue and let this just be really wet on wet. And then maybe I'll do one that's a little more dry. And I can see like this big brush holds a lot of water. And so if I get it too dry, I can play with, when does that brush run out of water? Like how far can I go? You can see that it didn't go all the way across the page. But again, we're looking for what are the shapes? What does the color do on the page? What do we like to paint? Are stripes too boring? But just learning to play with our paint, see what it does. How does it dry? Right? This one that is wet on wet is I'm getting some, interesting texture and separation, but I also maybe want that color to be a little more vibrant. The colors are more vibrant when they're wet on dry. I kind of like these scallop shapes here. So get lots of water on that page. Let's switch up our palette. My lights are so bright it's hard to see where the water is on the page, but look how, I don't keep that same scalloped edge. I don't have nearly as much control. It's not good or bad, right? Just noticing. And the more water I have, then the fainter the watercolor is. So one of the things when watercolor dries, right, is that it always dries lighter than it goes on. And if I want to really get crazy, I can let that just kind of run down the page a little bit and let's see what happens. So again, this is always, always just about play. And it's interesting because the water catches it, right? The water catches it. And all of a sudden we have an interesting page happening here, right? Instead of just those lines that weren't that interesting. And so then I can just continue to play and add to this. And so now maybe my stripes are going in a different direction. Just lightly touch that color to the wet color and see what happens. You get these beautiful blooms. And suddenly I have this bright, cheerful page, right? This bright, cheerful page. And it's making me want to just come in and brighten up the blue. And this is a big page, right? There's a lot to fill here, which gives me a lot of lovely room for experimentation and play for looking at color combinations. Seeing how things mix and flow. And all I'm doing is just tapping my brush a little bit. I've got a lot of water on my brush, so it's creating some of that nice flow on the page. I'm probably getting some nice watercolor on the other page as well. And again, all of a sudden the colors are shifting and changing as they mix and flow together. So all the just different ways that we can play on the page to bring ourselves right here, right now, into the moment. I'm not thinking about all the things that I need to get done today, about my long to-do list. You know, the bad part about being gone for 9 days is there's a lot to do when you get back. And I'm not worried about any of it in the moment, right? I'm just right here, right now. So I come back to a much smaller brush. And I'm just going to continue to play with the paint on the page, adding now some different marks to those stripes, seeing where the paint is still wet. Not loving that bright yellow, so I'm going to come in with that ochre again. Feels like a nice, warm, sunshiny color today. Finally feels like it's spring here. Makes my heart happy. And just the brush itself makes interesting little shapes, right? Just so much play to happen on the page here. Let's see. I'm going to grab just a different shape brush. And I'm going to come in. Let's see. Let's put some of this here. And again, I'm just going to see what kind of shape I can get with the brush. And one of the techniques for making leaves is to take the point of the brush, just barely put it down, press that brush down, and then lift that back up again. And you get this beautiful sort of elongated shape. And this one definitely, for me, takes some practice. And again, it's all about how much water you have on the page. This is definitely a drier technique, but they're very satisfying. Again, very mindful. Just takes that focus, being right here, right now. I have nowhere to go, nothing to do. Just be here on the page. And I love these green leafy shapes. It's making all of a sudden the page feel just that little bit more complete. And with these watercolor doodles, it's hard to know when to stop. It's why I usually like to have multiple pieces of paper in front of me and just sort of work back and forth on the pages. Letting one dry. You can use a dryer on the watercolor, but you don't get some of the nice flowy effects. I really prefer watercolor to dry naturally. And again, to just learn to use your creative practice as a form of mindfulness, of allowing yourself to come into the present moment, to let go of worries and concerns, to intuitively choose the colors that are going to lift your spirits. I opted for a limited palette. I didn't mix any colors. I just worked with the colors that are here on the page. Again, I love when you get these little bit of runs happening. It's just sort of that little bit of joyful experimentation that's kind of always the gift and the surprise of watercolor. And noticing how you can vary the intensity of the colors with the water. And I don't know which way is up and which way is down. And this is where the joy of it just doesn't even matter at all. And this is definitely one that I want to go back and add. In fact, maybe I'll do that tomorrow. I'll come back and show how I would take these abstract designs and bring my micron pens in and make some gorgeous doodles on them. So I think I'll do that tomorrow, add some floral designs and some zentangle patterns. I love the simplicity of this one, and it just started with putting those watercolor circles down. Again, I really love this is a very, very neutral palette, not a super vibrant palette. But in this set, I can also get those much more vibrant colors. So love where this one is going. So this one will get finished off with some more watercolor patterns as well. But here, just in this last, 40 minutes of just joyful creative play, all I did was put color on paper. And what a great way to just start my day with intentional painting. And it's intentional in the sense that it's about mindfulness, it's about being present on the page, with the page, and about letting go of any expectations. There's no project here, there's no destination. there's only how can I just simply play on the page. So join me again for part two tomorrow. Join me and Diego apparently as well for part two tomorrow, where I'm going to come in and show how I would use these as the basis for bringing in some intricate black and white line drawing and having a lot of fun doing that. So we'll continue our journey through using just color and paint and play to boost our mood this week. So glad to be back with you guys. If you like this video, please click like so that other people know it's worthy and YouTube will show it to other people. If you're just watching for the first time, hit that subscribe button and join me live or catch the replays most mornings at 7 a.m. Mountain Time. Thank you, Tori. Thank you, Yvonne. Um, and maybe I'll come in with some Daniel Smith watercolors tomorrow as well and just show what some of the differences are working with that little bit higher quality of watercolor paint. So have a beautiful, mindful rest of your day, and may that inspiration serve you throughout the day. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye bye.